After 8 years of silence, I walked into my sister's wedding because my dying father had begged me to come, swearing the family had changed and wanted to reconcile after they chose her side when she accused me of stealing $15,000 that she had actually taken herself. I sat through the ceremony quietly until the reception, when my sister grabbed the microphone to thank everyone who supported her through difficult times, especially when certain toxic people tried to destroy our family. Every head in that ballroom turned toward me. My mother's face flushed red. My aunts whispered behind their hands. My sister's smile was pure venom as she locked eyes with me, savoring every second of my public humiliation. I stood slowly, the scrape of my chair echoing in the sudden silence. Instead of fleeing like everyone expected, I raised my champagne glass high and smiled back at her. The smile apparently unsettled her because her triumphant expression flickered for just a moment. "Congratulations, Madison," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "I hope married life brings you everything you truly deserve." Then I reached into my clutch, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and placed it deliberately on the head table in front of my parents before walking out with my head high, leaving 300 wedding guests buzzing with confusion and my sister's face drained of all color. I'm Victoria Sterling, 34 years old, and for 8 years I've been the family pariah, the accused thief who supposedly stole from her own sister. What my family didn't know was that I had spent those 8 years doing more than just nursing my wounds and rebuilding my shattered reputation. I had been meticulously, patiently, brilliantly preparing for this exact moment. The envelope I just left contained enough evidence to demolish not just Madison's wedding day, but her entire carefully constructed life. And the best part? She had handed me every weapon I needed through her own greed and lies, documented in ways she never imagined possible. My father wanted reconciliation. He was about to get something far more permanent, the truth. The theft accusation had come out of nowhere 8 years ago, during a family dinner at my parents' lakeside home in Connecticut. I was 26, working as a junior architect at a prestigious firm in Boston, finally hitting my stride professionally after years of student loans and unpaid internships. Madison was 23, living at home after dropping out of college for the third time, working part-time at our aunt's boutique when she felt like it. "Victoria stole $15,000 from me," Madison announced, standing up from the table with tears streaming down her face. Our mother's fork clattered against her plate. Our father set down his wine glass carefully, his expression unreadable. "She accessed my savings account somehow and transferred all my money. I'm completely broke because of her." The accusation was so absurd I actually laughed, which was apparently the worst possible response. "Madison, that's insane. I don't even have access to your accounts." "How would I possibly?" "You had my laptop last month when yours was being repaired," she interrupted, her voice rising hysterically. "You must have gotten into my banking information then. Who else would have done it? You're the only one who's had access to my things." It was true I'd borrowed her laptop for 2 days when mine crashed during a crucial project deadline, but I'd only used it for work, hadn't touched any of her personal files. "I used it for AutoCAD renderings, Madison. I didn't go through your personal information." My mother stood, moving to Madison's side and wrapping protective arms around her. "Sweetheart, are you absolutely certain about this? This is a serious accusation." "Look at her bank statements," Madison wailed, pulling printed pages from her purse with theatrical timing that should have been my first clue this was staged. $15,000 gone in 3 transfers over 2 weeks. And Victoria is the only one who could have done it. She's always been jealous of me. Jealous. Of Madison. The irony would have been funny if the situation wasn't spiraling so catastrophically. Madison, who had failed out of 3 different colleges, who hadn't held a steady job in years, who lived rent-free in our parents' house, while I was struggling to make rent and student loan payments in one of the most expensive cities in America. "Let me see those," I said, reaching for the statements. The transfers had indeed happened. 3 separate withdrawals of $5,000 each over a 2-week period in late August, sent to an account number I didn't recognize. "Madison, I didn't do this. I wouldn't do this. We need to call the bank and—" "The bank already investigated," my father interrupted, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard directed at me before. "Madison filed a report last week. They said the transfers were initiated using her login credentials from an IP address in Boston, where I lived." The noose was tightening with precision that felt almost professional. "Dad, thousands of people have IP addresses in Boston. That doesn't prove anything. Let me contact my internet provider. We can show—" "Can you explain why you suddenly paid off your car loan last month?" Madison asked, her tears drying remarkably quickly. "Mom mentioned you'd finally cleared that debt." "Funny timing, don't you think?" My blood ran cold. I had paid off my car loan, but not with stolen money. I'd gotten a performance bonus at work, my first significant extra money since graduating. That was my bonus from the Riverside Commons project. My firm paid out team bonuses. I can show you the pay stub. How convenient, Madison said, and I saw calculation in her eyes that I'd somehow missed my entire life. You get a mysterious bonus right after my money disappears. The dinner devolved into chaos. My mother took Madison's side immediately, always had favored her younger daughter. My father wanted to investigate further, but his tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. My two younger brothers, Kyle and Austin, sat silent and uncomfortable, not willing to take sides publicly, but their expressions suggesting they believed Madison's tears over my protests. I think you should leave, my father finally said, and those 5 words shattered something in me that had never fully healed. Until we sort this out, it's better if you're not around Madison. She's clearly traumatized by this betrayal. I drove back to Boston in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was exploding with messages. My aunt demanding I return Madison's money immediately. My grandmother saying she was disappointed beyond words. Cousins I barely knew weighing in with judgments. The family group chat I'd been part of since high school had suddenly gone silent, and when I checked, I'd been removed. Only my college friend Petra believed me without question. "This is insane," she said when I called her sobbing at midnight. "Your family knows you. How could they think you're capable of theft?" "Because Madison's always been the victim," I said bitterly, "and I've always been the responsible one. Maybe they think responsible people are capable of anything." The next weeks were a nightmare of failed explanations and closed doors. I hired a lawyer with money I couldn't spare, who confirmed that while I could probably prove my innocence eventually, the process would be expensive and time-consuming. The bank's investigation had been cursory at best, and Madison's story had enough surface plausibility to make a fraud case difficult. "The problem is motive and opportunity," my lawyer explained. "She's established that you had access to her laptop, which could have given you her banking information, and the timing with your car loan payoff is unfortunate. To prove your innocence definitively, we'd need to access the receiving account's information, and that requires either law enforcement involvement or a civil lawsuit, both of which cost money you've indicated you don't have. I couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle. My entry-level architect salary barely covered my basic expenses. Fighting to prove my innocence would require thousands of dollars I didn't possess, for a crime I hadn't committed, against a sister who apparently had no qualms about destroying me. My parents made their position clear in a cold email from my father 2 weeks after the accusation. "Until you take responsibility for what you've done, and make restitution to Madison, we cannot have a relationship with you. Your mother and I raised you better than this, and we're profoundly disappointed. No investigation, no benefit of the doubt, just instant judgment and exile. 8 years of straight A's, scholarships, responsible choices, stable employment, all erased by Madison's crocodile tears and circumstantial evidence. The social fallout was equally devastating. Family events happened without me. My name was no longer mentioned. When my grandmother turned 80, I wasn't invited to the celebration. When Kyle graduated college, my parents made it clear my presence would upset Madison, and I shouldn't come. I became a ghost, erased from the family narrative as if I'd never existed. But I didn't sit idle in my exile. Something Madison said that night had stuck with me, a tiny detail that didn't quite fit. She'd claimed the money was her savings, accumulated from her part-time work, but $15 was an impossible amount for someone working maybe 20 hours a week at a boutique, someone who'd never shown any ability to save money, someone who'd asked my parents for loans constantly. 6 months after the accusation, I hired a private investigator with money saved from taking on freelance drafting work on weekends. "I need to know where my sister got $15,000, I told him, because it wasn't from working retail part-time. What he uncovered over the next 3 months was breathtaking in its audacity. Madison hadn't saved that money. She'd manipulated it out of our grandmother over the course of a year, spinning stories about needing money for online courses and business startup costs and medical expenses not covered by insurance. Our grandmother, showing early signs of the dementia that would later take her, had written check after check, never mentioning it to anyone because Madison had convinced her to keep it their special secret. The investigator found the canceled checks, still in our grandmother's banking records. He found text messages between Madison and her boyfriend at the time, discussing how the old lady was an easy mark, and they were planning to milk it as long as possible. He found evidence that Madison had then washed the money through her own account to make it look legitimate before staging its theft. But the real revelation came when the investigator traced where the stolen money actually went. Not to me, obviously. To an account in the Cayman Islands, opened by Madison herself 3 months before the accusation, using falsified identity documents she'd purchased online. She'd stolen from herself, blamed me, and hidden the money offshore where our parents couldn't accidentally discover it. The level of premeditation was staggering. She'd borrowed my laptop specifically to create a false trail. She'd timed the transfers to coincide with my bonus. She'd researched how to set up offshore accounts. This wasn't an impulsive lie. It was an orchestrated frame job by someone who'd apparently spent significant time planning exactly how to destroy me while enriching herself. "What are you going to do with this information?" the investigator asked when he delivered his final report. I looked at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, proof of my innocence and Madison's calculated betrayal. Part of me wanted to drive to my parents immediately, to shove this truth in their faces and demand apologies, but a wiser voice whispered that Madison was capable of anything, that she'd find a way to spin even this, that I needed to be smarter. "I'm going to wait," I said finally. "Madison's greedy. She won't be able to resist using that offshore money eventually. And when she does, when she really needs it for something important, that's when I'll destroy her with the truth." The investigator looked skeptical, but accepted his final payment. I filed every piece of evidence in a fireproof safe, backed up digitally in 3 separate secure locations, and returned to my life of productive exile. Years passed. I focused on my career, rapidly advancing at my firm. I made new friends who knew nothing about my family drama. I dated, traveled, built a life that didn't include the people who'd abandoned me so easily. But I never forgot, and I never stopped monitoring Madison from a distance. Through social media, through mutual acquaintances, through careful observation, I tracked my sister's life. She stayed living with our parents, never quite managing to launch herself despite their continued financial support. She went through boyfriends rapidly, each relationship ending in drama. She started and abandoned various business ventures, all funded by our parents. She was, by any objective measure, failing at adult life, yet still somehow remained the family favorite. Then 3 months ago, everything changed. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, a death sentence delivered with a 6-month prognosis. And suddenly, after 8 years of silence, he wanted reconciliation. "Your father's dying wish is to see his family whole again," my mother said when she finally called, her voice stiff and formal. "He's asked that we all put the past behind us. Madison has agreed to forgive what happened, and we hope you'll do the same." Forgive, as if I was the one who needed forgiving, as if I had something to apologize for. "What about the $15,000? I asked quietly. "Does Madison plan to return that in this grand reconciliation?" "Victoria, please. Your father is dying. Surely after all this time you can let go of your resentment about money. Madison made mistakes, we all have. But family is more important than old grudges." Made mistakes. The sanitization of deliberately orchestrated fraud was almost impressive. "And what makes you think I'm the one holding grudges, Mother? Madison's getting married in 3 months. She continued, ignoring my question, "to a wonderful man named Patrick. The wedding will be at the Grandview Country Club. Your father would very much like you to be there. He says he can't die in peace unless his daughters reconcile." The emotional manipulation was blatant, but beneath it I sensed an opportunity. Madison was getting married, presumably planning to use her hidden $15,000 to help fund her wedding or her new life. And my dying father wanted me there. Perfect. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up before my mother could press further. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later, addressed in Madison's familiar looping handwriting, as if 8 years of exile had never happened. I held the heavy cardstock, feeling the expensive weight of it, and smiled slowly. Everything was falling into place perfectly. The week after receiving Madison's wedding invitation, I scheduled a meeting with my original private investigator, Marcus Pemberton. He'd moved on to running his own security consulting firm, but agreed to see me when I mentioned Madison's name. "I wondered if you'd ever use that information," he said, settling into the chair across from his desk. 8 years is a long time to sit on evidence like that. "I was waiting for the right moment," I replied, sliding a copy of the wedding invitation across his desk. "Madison's marrying someone named Patrick Rothschild. I need you to find out everything about him, particularly his financial situation and what he knows about Madison's offshore account." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think she hasn't told him?" "Madison's fundamental nature is deception," I said. "She won't have disclosed illegal offshore accounts to her fiancé, but I'm betting she's planning to access that money soon, probably for the wedding or their new life together. When she does, I want documentation of every transaction." Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus provided regular updates. Patrick Rothschild was exactly what I'd expected. Wealthy family, trust fund baby, working a cushy job at his father's investment firm. He'd met Madison at a charity gala my aunt had dragged her to, apparently charmed by what he saw as her down-to-earth personality. His parents were less enthusiastic, viewing Madison as a gold digger, but Patrick was 38 and determined to prove his independence by marrying for love rather than pedigree. "The interesting part," Marcus said during our final meeting before the wedding, "is that Madison's been slowly transferring money back from the Cayman account. Small amounts, under $10,000 at a time to avoid triggering reporting requirements. It's been flowing into a separate account Patrick doesn't know about. Best I can tell, she's accumulated about $40,000 total now, between the original 15 and what she's been skimming from your parents over the years." "Skimming from my parents?" I repeated. Marcus pulled out another folder. "Your mother put Madison on several of their accounts about 4 years ago. supposedly to help with household bills while living at home. Madison's been taking an extra $200 to $300 monthly, sometimes more, small enough that your parents, who aren't exactly hurting financially, haven't noticed. Over 4 years, it adds up. I thought about my parents' lake house, the renovations they'd been planning but kept postponing, the complaints about finances being tighter than expected in retirement, all while Madison bled them dry in tiny increments. Does Patrick know about any of this? Patrick thinks Madison works full-time at your aunt's boutique and has modest savings from living frugally, Marcus said with barely concealed disgust. He's planning to buy them a house as a wedding gift, putting it entirely in both their names. Madison's been encouraging expensive upgrades, pushing the budget higher. My guess is she's planning to use her hidden money for furnishings and personal expenses, maintaining the illusion she's contributing financially while actually spending money she stole. What about the wedding itself? Madison told Patrick her parents are paying. Tradition and all that. She's actually funding most of it herself with stolen money, letting your parents contribute maybe 20%. They think they're being generous, helping with a modest celebration. Madison's spending close to $80,000 total. The scale of her deception was breathtaking. She'd framed me for theft, stolen from our grandmother, embezzled from our parents, and was now defrauding her fiancé, all while maintaining the facade of being the wounded victim of her terrible older sister. I need documentation of everything, I said. Bank records, transfer receipts, the works, and I need you at the wedding. Marcus looked surprised. You want me there? I want video documentation of what I'm about to do, I explained. Multiple angles, professional quality. I want every moment recorded in a way that can't be disputed later. Can you set that up discreetly? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're really going to burn it all down at her wedding? My father's dying wish is reconciliation, I said flatly. I'm going to give him the truth instead. He deserves to know which daughter actually betrayed the family. The week before the wedding, I visited my father. The cancer had ravaged him, transforming the robust man I remembered into a skeletal figure propped up by pillows in my parents' living room. My mother hovered nearby, her face lined with exhaustion and grief. Victoria, he said, his voice weak, but his eyes brightening. You came. You asked me to? I replied, sitting carefully on the edge of the couch near his recliner. How are you feeling? Dying, he said with a ghost of his old humor. But grateful you're here. Your mother tells me you're planning to attend the wedding. I am. I reached over and took his hand, the bones too prominent beneath papery skin. I need you to know something, Dad. Whatever happens at that wedding, I love you. I've always loved you. And everything I do is because you raised me to value truth and justice. Something flickered in his eyes, a momentary uncertainty. That sounds ominous. I just want you to understand that sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, I continued, but it's still the truth. And you taught me never to run from it, no matter how painful. My mother made a small sound of distress. Victoria, please. Your father is dying. Can't we just have peace for whatever time remains? That depends on what you define as peace, Nur, I said, standing. I'll see you both at the wedding. I left before either could respond. My heart pounding, but my resolve strengthened. My father deserved truth, even ugly truth, especially ugly truth. The morning of the wedding, I dressed carefully in a deep emerald dress, elegant but not attention-seeking, expensive enough to signal I'd done well despite being ostracized. I styled my hair in a sophisticated updo and wore the diamond earrings I'd bought myself when I made partner at my firm 2 years ago, a milestone my family hadn't been there to celebrate. The Grandview Country Club was exactly as pretentious as expected. All white columns and manicured lawns, the kind of venue that charged premiums for the privilege of exclusivity. I arrived alone, having declined my boyfriend David's offer to accompany me. This was family business, messy and complicated, and I didn't want him caught in the blast radius. Marcus had texted earlier, team in position, 3 cameras, all discreet. Good luck. I walked into the ceremony just as guests were being seated, deliberately timing my arrival to maximize impact. Heads turned as I entered, whispers rippling through the assembled crowd. I recognized aunts, uncles, cousins, all people who'd believed Madison's lies and shunned me without question. My mother's face went white when she saw me. My brothers, now grown men, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Madison stood at the altar in a dress that probably cost more than my first car, all lace and crystals, her face glowing with happiness. Patrick stood beside her, handsome in his tuxedo, looking at her with obvious adoration. They made a beautiful couple, the kind that graced the society pages my family read religiously. I slid into a seat in the back row, ignoring the pointed stairs, and watched my sister get married with a smile on my face. She saw me halfway through the ceremony, her eyes widening momentarily before she recovered her composure. Good. I wanted her to know I was here, wanted her to spend her entire reception wondering what I planned to do. The ceremony concluded without incident. Patrick kissed his bride. Guests applauded. Everyone filed into the reception hall, where tables covered in white linens and crystal glasses awaited. centerpieces of roses that probably cost hundreds each. I accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter and found my assigned seat, unsurprised to discover I'd been placed at a table in the far corner, as far from the head table as possible while still technically being included. Dinner service began. I made polite small talk with the strangers at my table, distant family friends who didn't know me well enough to understand the significance of my presence. I ate salmon and asparagus, drank expensive wine, and waited. The toasts began after dinner. Patrick's father gave a diplomatic speech welcoming Madison to the family with obvious reservations beneath his polite words. My mother spoke tearfully about Madison's journey to find true love, conveniently editing out 8 years of failed relationships and poor decisions. My father, too weak to stand, offered a few words from his wheelchair about the blessing of family. Then Madison grabbed the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this incredible day," she began, her voice carrying across the ballroom with practiced ease. "Patrick and I are so grateful for your love and support, especially because we've both had to overcome obstacles to get here." She paused dramatically, her eyes finding mine across the room. "Some people in life try to tear you down instead of building you up. Some people, even people you're supposed to trust, betray you in the worst possible ways." The room fell silent, everyone instinctively understanding something significant was happening. "But I've learned that family is about more than blood," Madison continued, her voice taking on a righteous tone. "It's about the people who stand by you through difficult times, the people who believe in you when others try to destroy your reputation with lies and theft." She paused again. "So thank you to everyone who supported me through difficult times, especially when certain toxic people tried to destroy our family." Every head in the ballroom turned toward me. My mother's face flushed red. My aunts whispered behind their hands. Madison's smile was pure venom as she locked eyes with me, savoring every second of my public humiliation. Patrick looked confused, clearly not understanding the context but sensing the drama. This was the moment. 8 years of patience, 8 years of careful planning, 8 years of knowing this opportunity would come if I just waited. I stood slowly, the scrape of my chair echoing in the sudden silence. Instead of fleeing like everyone expected, I raised my champagne glass high and smiled back at Madison. The smile apparently unsettled her because her triumphant expression flickered. "Congratulations, Madison," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "I hope married life brings you everything you truly deserve." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the thick manila envelope I'd prepared, walking steadily through the silent crowd toward the head table. Madison's smile had frozen into something brittle. Patrick's confusion had deepened into concern. My parents watched with expressions I couldn't read. I placed the envelope deliberately on the table in front of my parents, not Madison. "This is for you, Mom and Dad," I said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Since Dad's dying wishes reconciliation through truth, I thought you should finally know what actually happened 8 years ago." Then I turned and walked out of that ballroom with my head high, ignoring Madison's voice calling after me, ignoring my mother's gasp, leaving 300 wedding guests buzzing with confusion and speculation. Behind me, I knew my father would open that envelope. He'd always valued truth above comfort, and what he found inside would detonate Madison's carefully constructed life like a bomb. I drove directly to a hotel I'd booked beforehand, a neutral space where I couldn't be ambushed by family members demanding explanations. My phone started ringing before I even reached the parking lot. My mother, then Kyle, then Austin. I let them all go to voicemail, pouring myself a glass of wine from the minibar and settling onto the bed to wait. Marcus called 30 minutes later. "That was spectacular," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "We got everything. Your father opened the envelope almost immediately." The look on Madison's face when she realized what was happening was priceless. "What happened after I left?" "Chaos. Your father started reading the documents out loud. The offshore account records, the transfers from your grandmother, the bank statements showing Madison's hidden account. Madison tried to grab the papers, claiming they were falsified. Patrick asked what offshore account. Your mother started crying. Half the guests were filming on their phones. And Madison? She's claiming you fabricated everything. Says you're so desperate to ruin her happiness that you created elaborate fake documents. Patrick looked skeptical though, especially when your father pointed out the bank letterheads and official seals. Your brother Kyle asked some pointed questions about the timeline. Madison stormed out about 20 minutes ago. Patrick stayed, talking intensely with your father. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. How's my father handling it? Hard to say. He looked devastated but also angry. Really angry. He kept saying, "I need to understand this," and asking your mother if she knew anything about the offshore accounts. My mother. Of course. Did she admit anything? Not in the video footage we captured, but body language suggests she at least suspected something over the years. She kept trying to downplay it, saying families shouldn't air private matters at weddings. Your father wasn't having it. After Marcus hung up, I finally checked my voicemail messages. My mother's message was predictably defensive. "Victoria, How could you do this at your sister's wedding? Whatever issues you have should have been discussed privately. You've humiliated this entire family. Kyle's message was more thoughtful. Hey, I don't know what to think right now, but some of those documents Dad read looked really official. Can you call me? I think we need to talk about what actually happened 8 years ago. Austin's message was angry. This is low, even for you. You couldn't let Madison have one happy day? Whatever your issues with her, this was cruel timing. Nothing from my father, which somehow hurt more than the recriminations. Nothing from Madison, which suggested she was regrouping, planning her counterattack. I slept poorly, checking my phone throughout the night for updates that didn't come. Dawn brought a text from Marcus. Your father has requested to meet with you. Alone. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at his house. He says your mother and Madison will not be there. The next 30 hours crawled by. I worked on my laptop, attempting to focus on actual job responsibilities, while my phone continued erupting with messages. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. Friends of Madison sent hostile texts. My aunt, whose boutique employed Madison, left an irate voicemail about family loyalty. But other messages started filtering through too. A cousin who'd always liked me, admitting she'd always wondered about Madison's story. A former college friend of Madison's who said my sister had a pattern of manipulation, even back then. My old high school chemistry teacher, who'd seen the story blow up on local social media, sending support and saying she'd never believed Victoria Sterling would steal anything. The truth was seeping out through the cracks Madison had tried to seal with lies. Sunday at 1:45 p.m., I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. The house looked the same as always, the lake sparkling beyond the back lawn, gardens my mother tended meticulously in full bloom. Except now I knew those gardens had been maintained partially with money Madison had stolen. My father answered the door himself, looking even more diminished than days before. Come in, he said quietly, and I followed him to his study, a room I'd always loved with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather furniture. He settled carefully into his desk chair, gesturing for me to take the chair across from him. The manila envelope sat on his desk, papers spread across the surface in organized stacks. He'd clearly spent considerable time reviewing everything. I've spent 2 days reading and rereading these documents, he began, his voice hoarse. I've called the banks to verify authenticity. I've spoken with the investigator whose contact information you included. I've reviewed the timeline against my own records and memories. He paused, his hands trembling slightly. Victoria, I owe you an apology that I don't have adequate words for. The validation I'd waited 8 years to hear should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. You believed her without question. I did. He looked down at his hands. Your mother and I both did. Madison seemed so genuinely distraught, and the circumstantial evidence she presented seemed compelling. But that's not an excuse. We should have investigated more thoroughly. We should have given you the benefit of doubt. We should have trusted the daughter who'd never given us reason not to. Why didn't you? I asked, the question that had haunted me for 8 years. I'd been responsible my entire life. Madison had a history of exaggeration and drama. Why was it so easy to believe I'd suddenly become a thief? He was quiet for a long moment. Because believing Madison meant we didn't have to confront harder truths about her, he finally admitted. If you had stolen from her, it was a contained problem, a situation we could address and move past. If Madison had made up the accusation, that meant acknowledging our younger daughter was capable of a level of manipulation and cruelty we didn't want to accept. So you sacrificed me to maintain your illusions about her? Yes. The single word hung in the air. And I will regret that for whatever time I have left, which, according to my doctors, isn't much. I looked at my father, this man I'd adored growing up, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with calculus homework and walked me through my first architectural blueprints. Cancer had stolen his body, but Madison's lies had stolen something else entirely. My ability to trust that love was unconditional. The offshore account, he continued, I verified it exists. The money Madison claimed you stole is sitting in the Cayman Islands, exactly as your investigator documented. She's been slowly transferring it back over the past year. I also reviewed my own banking records and found the discrepancies your investigator mentioned. Madison has been taking money from our household accounts for years. Does Mom know? She admitted she'd noticed inconsistencies, but convinced herself she was miscalculating. She didn't want to accuse Madison without being certain. He smiled bitterly. The irony of that, given how readily she accused you. What about the money from Grandma? His face darkened. I called the attorney handling her estate. Your grandmother's bank records show exactly what your investigator found. Madison manipulated a woman beginning to show dementia, exploiting her confusion and affection. That money was supposed to be part of her estate, split between all 5 grandchildren. So Madison didn't just steal from me. She stole from Kyle, Austin, and our cousins, too. Yes, he picked up one of the bank statements, studying it. I've also learned some troubling things about this marriage. Patrick's father called me yesterday. Apparently, Patrick had been having doubts about Madison, but his family convinced him to go through with the wedding, rather than call it off so close to the date. Now, with these revelations, Patrick is consulting divorce attorneys about annulment. Already, they've been married 2 days. Fraud is grounds for annulment in Connecticut, my father explained. Patrick learned yesterday that Madison's been hiding significant assets while encouraging him to make major financial commitments based on false information about her circumstances. His father, who never liked Madison, is pushing hard for annulment before any marital property issues become complicated. I absorbed this. Madison's perfect wedding, her wealthy husband, her new life, all of it crumbling within 48 hours. It should have felt satisfying. It did feel satisfying. But underneath was a layer of sadness for the family we could have been if Madison hadn't been so fundamentally dishonest. I want to make this right, my father said, leaning forward intently. However I can, with whatever time I have. I've already called Kyle and Austin, told them the full truth. They're ashamed they didn't question Madison's story more carefully. They want to see you. Apologize in person. And Mom, he hesitated. Your mother is struggling. She's having difficulty accepting the extent of Madison's deception. She keeps saying there must be explanations we're not seeing, circumstances that justify Madison's actions. She's asked me not to take any legal action against Madison. Legal action? The money Madison took from my accounts is technically theft. The fraud regarding her grandmother could be prosecuted. The offshore account may involve tax issues. I could press charges if I chose to. I studied my father's face, seeing the conflict there. Even now, even with overwhelming evidence, he didn't want to fully accept that his younger daughter was a criminal who'd spent years systematically stealing from family. What do you want to do? What I want, he said slowly, is for Madison to face real consequences, to be held accountable for what she's done. But your mother has threatened to leave me if I involve law enforcement. She says I'll die alone if I destroy Madison's life. So she's willing to lose you to protect the daughter who's been stealing from both of you for years? She sees it as choosing between her daughters. If I prosecute Madison, your mother says she'll never forgive me. He looked at me helplessly. I don't want to die with my wife refusing to speak to me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when I could dictate terms. My father was offering me vindication, validation, the acknowledgement I'd been denied for 8 years. But he was also asking me to let Madison escape legal consequences to preserve his marriage in his final months. I'm not the one who needs to make this decision, I said finally. This is between you, Mom, and Madison, but I want 2 things. Name them. First, I want a written statement from you acknowledging that I never stole anything from Madison, that I was innocent of all accusations, and that you and Mom wrongly accused and ostracized me based on Madison's lies. I want that statement shared with every family member who believed her story. Done. What else? Second, I want Madison to admit what she did, publicly, to the entire family. No more lies. No more manipulation. She faces everyone and tells the truth about the offshore account, the money from Grandma, everything. If she does that, I won't push for prosecution. My father nodded slowly. I'll make that happen. Your mother won't like it, but I'll insist. I stood to leave, feeling emotionally drained. At the door, I turned back. Dad, why did you believe me this time? When I gave you that envelope, you could have assumed it was falsified like Madison claimed. Why did you actually read it? He looked at me with watery eyes. Because of what you said the week before the wedding. You told me that everything you did would be because I raised you to value truth and justice. I realized then that I'd taught you those values, but failed to apply them myself. When you handed me that envelope, I knew whatever was inside would be the truth, even if it was a truth I didn't want to face. The family meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday, 6 days after Madison's disastrous wedding reception. My father organized it over my mother's strenuous objections, insisting that everyone needed to hear the truth directly. The location was neutral, a private room at a restaurant rather than family property, and attendance was mandatory for all immediate family members. I arrived early, positioning myself at the far end of the table where I could see everyone. Kyle and Austin came next, both looking uncomfortable. Kyle immediately walked over to me. I'm so sorry, he said, and I could hear genuine regret in his voice. I was 19 when you were accused. I didn't know how to question Dad and Mom's judgment, but I should have. I should have asked more questions, trusted you more. I'm really sorry, Victoria. Austin was less eloquent, but equally sincere. Yeah, what he said. We were stupid kids who took Mom's side without thinking. That was wrong. My aunts and uncles filed in next, their expressions ranging from embarrassed to defensive. The ones who'd been most vocal in condemning me 8 years ago couldn't quite meet my eyes. My mother arrived last, her face set in rigid lines, refusing to look at me at all. Madison didn't show up. At precisely 3 p.m., my father's phone rang. He answered, listened, then put it on speaker. Madison has agreed to participate via video call, he announced. She says she can't face everyone in person. Of course she can't, I muttered, loud enough for nearby family to hear. My father propped his phone on a stand, and Madison's face appeared on screen. She'd clearly been crying, her eyes red and swollen, her hair pulled back messily, but I recognized the calculated quality of her distress, the performance of victimhood she'd perfected over the years. Madison, my father began, his voice steady despite his obvious physical weakness. You're here because we need truth, not explanations, not justifications. Truth. Did you steal $15,000 from Grandma and then frame Victoria for theft to cover your actions? The room fell completely silent. Madison's face on the screen went through a series of expressions: defiance, calculation, fear, and finally something like resignation. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she said, her voice small. That's not what I asked. Yes or no? It's complicated, Dad. Grandma wanted to help me. Yes or no, Madison? A long pause. Then, barely audible. Yes. The word hung in the air. My mother made a choked sound. My Aunt Rita gasped. Kyle swore softly. Did you deliberately borrow Victoria's laptop to establish a false trail, suggesting she'd accessed your banking information? My father continued relentlessly. Yes. Did you set up an offshore account using false documents to hide the money? Yes. Did you time the accusation to coincide with Victoria's work bonus to make it appear she suddenly had money? Yes. My father's hands were shaking now, whether from illness or emotion, I couldn't tell. Did you know that accusing your sister would result in her being ostracized from this family for 8 years? I thought, Madison started. Yes or no? Yes. She was crying freely now, but I felt no sympathy. These were the tears of someone caught, not someone genuinely remorseful. Have you been stealing money from your mother's and my accounts for the past 4 years? I was just borrowing. Yes or no? Yes. My father set down his notes, looking directly into the camera at Madison's face. You didn't just steal money, Madison. You stole your sister's reputation, her family relationships, 8 years of her life. You let us believe terrible things about a daughter who'd never been anything but honest and responsible. You manipulated a woman with dementia. You defrauded every person in this room who loved and trusted you. I'm sorry, Madison sobbed. I'm so sorry. I was desperate and stupid, and I made terrible choices. Sorry isn't adequate, my father cut her off. Sorry doesn't undo 8 years of Victoria being treated like a criminal. Sorry doesn't return the money you stole from your grandmother that should have gone to all 5 grandchildren. Sorry doesn't repair the damage you've done to this family. He turned to address the room. I've prepared a written statement documenting Victoria's innocence and Madison's guilt. I'm sending it to everyone here, and I expect you to share it with anyone who believed Madison's lies 8 years ago. Victoria's reputation will be fully restored. Several family members were crying now. My Aunt Rita stood up and walked to my side, putting her hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Victoria. I said terrible things about you. I believed Madison without question. That was wrong, and I deeply apologize. One by one, other family members approached, offering apologies that ranged from awkward to heartfelt. Kyle hugged me tightly. Austin squeezed my hand. Even my Uncle Thomas, who'd been particularly harsh in his condemnation, admitted he'd been too quick to judge. My mother remained seated, staring at her hands. Eleanor, my father said, addressing her formally. Do you have anything to say to your daughter? My mother finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't the remorse I'd expected, but something closer to resentment. You could have handled this privately, she said stiffly. You didn't need to humiliate Madison at her wedding. You didn't need to make this so public. The words were so stunning in their wrongness that I actually laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. I handled it privately for 8 years while you treated me like a criminal. Madison made it public when she used her wedding toast to call me toxic in front of 300 people. She was emotional. It was her wedding day. She framed me for felony theft. My voice rose despite my intention to stay calm. She stole from her own grandmother. She's been embezzling from you for years. And your concern is that I embarrassed her at her wedding? She's still my daughter. So am I. The words exploded out of me. Or I was, until you decided Madison's lies were more important than the truth. Until you chose to believe the daughter with a history of manipulation over the one who'd never given you reason to doubt her. My father intervened, his voice sharp. Eleanor, you will apologize to Victoria, or you can leave this meeting. My mother stood abruptly. Fine, I'll leave. I won't sit here while you all crucify Madison. She made mistakes, yes, but she doesn't deserve this pile-on. She grabbed her purse and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. The door closed behind her, leaving shocked silence in her wake. On the video screen, Madison had stopped crying, her expression hardening. I guess I know where I stand, she said bitterly. Everyone's choosing Victoria's side now that she's convinced you all with her precious evidence. The evidence convinced us because it's true, Kyle said, speaking up for the first time. You framed our sister Madison. You destroyed her relationship with our family for almost a decade. How did you expect us to react? I expected my family to stand by me. Madison's voice rose. I expected some understanding that I was young and scared and made bad choices. But no. Victoria swoops in with her perfect documentation, and everyone immediately decides I'm the villain. You are the villain, Austin said quietly. You did villainous things. Patrick's filing for annulment, Madison spat. changing subjects abruptly. His father convinced him I'm a gold digger. I'm going to lose everything because Victoria couldn't let me have one happy moment. You're losing everything because you built your life on lies, I said, speaking directly to her for the first time. Patrick's leaving because you defrauded him. Your family is upset because you stole from us. None of this is happening because of what I did at your wedding. It's happening because of what you did 8 years ago and every day since. I hope you're happy, Madison hissed. You've destroyed my marriage, turned my family against me, ruined my life. Congratulations, Victoria. You won. I didn't want to win, I replied tiredly. I wanted the truth. I wanted my family back. But you made that impossible when you decided your convenience was more important than my life. Madison's face twisted with rage. You always thought you were better than me. Perfect Victoria with her perfect grades and perfect career. You couldn't stand that I found happiness, that someone actually wanted to marry me, so you sabotaged it. I provided evidence of your crimes, I corrected. That's not sabotage. That's justice. It's revenge, and you know it. Maybe it's both. My father ended the call abruptly, Madison's furious face disappearing mid-sentence. He sat back heavily, looking exhausted. I think we're done here. I want everyone to understand that Victoria is fully vindicated. Madison will face appropriate consequences, and anyone who continues to treat Victoria as anything other than the wronged party in this situation will no longer be welcome in my home. The meeting dissolved, family members filtering out in small groups, still processing. Kyle and Austin stayed, flanking me protectively as various relatives approached with additional apologies and expressions of support. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Just saw Patrick Rothschild's attorney file annulment papers at the courthouse. Grounds include fraud, material misrepresentation, and concealment of assets. It's going to be granted. I showed the text to my brothers. Kyle whistled softly. 2 days married and already filing for annulment. That might be a record. She did it to herself, Austin said. Though I almost feel bad for her. Almost. I didn't feel bad. Madison had spent 8 years as the favored daughter, living comfortably at home, supported financially and emotionally by parents who'd believed her lies without question. She'd stolen tens of thousands of dollars, destroyed my reputation, and manipulated everyone around her. 2 days of consequences didn't begin to balance the scales. My father called me over as the room cleared. There's one more thing, he said quietly. I've revised my will. Given Madison's documented theft from family members, I've removed her as a beneficiary. Everything will be split between you, Kyle, and Austin. Your mother will have her share, but Madison will receive nothing from my estate. Dad, it's already done. I met with my attorney yesterday. Madison's behavior has demonstrated she can't be trusted with family resources. I won't fund her lifestyle after I'm gone, especially when that lifestyle has been built on theft from family members. He paused. I'm also requiring Madison to repay the money she took from your grandmother's accounts. Not to me, but split among all 5 grandchildren as your grandmother intended. If she doesn't comply within 6 months, I've authorized the estate to pursue civil action. What did Mom say about this? I didn't tell her. The will is my decision, not hers. She'll learn about it after I'm gone. He looked at me intently. I can't undo 8 years of wrongful exile, Victoria. I can't restore that time or erase what you went through, but I can ensure that the truth is documented, that you're vindicated, and that Madison faces real financial consequences for her actions. I hugged my father carefully, mindful of his fragility. Thank you for believing me this time. I should have believed you the first time, he said. That's my failure to carry, not yours. The week following the family meeting brought cascading consequences for Madison that were more devastating than anything I could have orchestrated myself. The truth, once released, spread through our extended family and social circles like wildfire. And each person who learned the real story pulled their support from Madison in turn. Patrick's annulment proceedings moved forward with remarkable speed. His family's attorneys, motivated by the clear evidence of fraud, pushed the case through the system efficiently. Within 10 days, the marriage was legally dissolved as though it had never happened. Patrick's father, in a final gesture of disgust, sent Madison an invoice for his half of the wedding expenses, $40,000 due immediately. Madison, of course, didn't have $40,000 in accessible funds. The offshore account had been frozen by her bank when Patrick's attorneys exposed it during annulment proceedings, pending investigation into potential tax violations. Her secret account had been emptied to pay for wedding expenses she'd foolishly thought she could pass off as gifts from our parents. She'd been counting on Patrick's money to fund her lifestyle post-wedding, but the annulment meant she had no claim to any Rothschild assets. She was, essentially, broke for the first time in her adult life. My mother tried desperately to provide financial support, But my father blocked it. "She stole from us, Eleanor," he said firmly during an argument I overheard over the phone. "I'm not giving her more money to waste. She needs to face the consequences of her choices. She's our daughter, and she's destitute. She's destitute because she spent years stealing money and hiding it offshore rather than building a legitimate life. That's not our problem to solve anymore." My mother, caught between her loyalty to Madison and her dying husband's wishes, chose to stay with my father but made her resentment clear. She stopped speaking to me entirely, as though I were responsible for Madison's situation, rather than Madison herself. Madison's social standing collapsed with impressive speed. The country club crowd she'd cultivated dropped her immediately when the fraud details became public. Her friends, most of whom had been Patrick's friends first, sided with him. The boutique where she worked fired her after customers began complaining about being served by that thief from the news. Yes, the local news. The story was too juicy for the media to ignore. Wealthy family, wedding scandal, offshore accounts, dementia exploitation. The Hartford Courant ran a story titled "Fairy Tale Wedding Becomes Fraud Nightmare" that detailed Madison's schemes with barely concealed glee. Her photo appeared on the evening news, a shot captured by some wedding guest showing her face contorted with rage as my father read the evidence aloud. She became locally infamous, the cautionary tale whispered about at coffee shops and dinner parties. The woman who framed her sister, stole from her grandmother, and destroyed her own wedding with lies finally catching up to her. Kyle forwarded me a screenshot of Madison's social media, which she'd unwisely left public. The comments on her wedding photos were brutal. "Hope the fraud was worth it. Your sister deserves better than you. Imagine stealing from your own grandmother with dementia. Disgusting. Annulled in less than a week, LOL. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. Madison had been my sister once, before greed and manipulation transformed her into someone I didn't recognize. Watching her life disintegrate should have been satisfying. Mostly, it was just sad, but not sad enough to intercede on her behalf. 3 weeks after the wedding, Madison showed up at my condo. The doorman called up, his voice uncertain. "There's a Madison Sterling here to see you. She says she's your sister. Should I send her up?" I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. "Send her up." Madison looked terrible when I opened the door. Her hair was unwashed, pulled into a messy ponytail. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. No makeup. And had clearly been crying recently. She looked younger somehow, stripped of the polish she usually maintained. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, letting her enter. She stood in my living room, looking around at the home I'd built, despite her attempts to destroy me. The original artwork on the walls, the custom bookshelves, the view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, evidence of the success I'd achieved without family support. "Nice place," she said finally. "What do you want, Madison?" She turned to face me. "I'm sorry. You said that at the family meeting. I mean it this time." She sat on my couch without invitation, looking exhausted. "I've lost everything. Patrick, our house, my friends, my job, my reputation. I'm living in a studio apartment in East Hartford that costs half my unemployment check. I can't get hired anywhere because everyone knows my name. Mom won't talk to me because Dad forbids it. I have nothing. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry for what I did to you 8 years ago. I was selfish and stupid, and I convinced myself I was justified. I told myself you wouldn't really be hurt, that you'd move on, that it would all blow over. I didn't think about the consequences." "Yes, you did," I corrected. "You planned it meticulously. You borrowed my laptop deliberately. You timed everything to make me look guilty. You set up offshore accounts and falsified documents. That's not impulsive stupidity. That's calculated destruction." She flinched. "Okay, yes, I knew what I was doing. But I didn't think it through long term. I didn't think about you being cut off from the family for years. I thought maybe a few awkward months, and then things would settle down." "Why did you do it at all? What did I ever do to you that warranted destroying my life?" Madison was quiet for a long time. "You were perfect," she said finally. "Good grades, good job, good choices, everything. Mom and Dad were always comparing us. Why can't you be more like Victoria? Victoria wouldn't do this. Victoria would handle this better." I was so tired of being the disappointing daughter. When I needed money and took it from Grandma, and you happened to have borrowed my laptop right around then, I saw an opportunity to frame me for your crime, an opportunity to finally be the victim instead of the screw-up, to have Mom and Dad on my side for once, sympathizing with me instead of disappointed in me. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I know that's not a good reason. I know it doesn't justify anything, but you asked why, and that's why." I sat in the chair across from her, studying this person who shared my DNA but seemed fundamentally alien to me. "Do you understand what you took from me? Not just money, but 8 years of family relationships, holidays, birthdays, milestones, Kyle's graduation, Austin's wedding, Grandma's funeral. I missed all of it because you needed to be the victim for once. I know. Do you? Because you're here apologizing. But it sounds like you're more sorry about the consequences to yourself than the harm you caused me. She didn't deny it. I'm sorry for both. I'm sorry I hurt you, and I'm sorry I destroyed my own life in the process. I thought I was clever, hiding money offshore, playing everyone, but I was just digging myself deeper into lies. And now I have nothing, and it's entirely my fault. What do you want from me, Madison? I don't know, she admitted. Forgiveness, maybe? Or just understanding that I'm not completely evil? Just someone who made catastrophically bad choices? I thought about my father's offer to prosecute, about the criminal charges Madison could face for theft, fraud, tax evasion. I thought about the power I held to make her situation even worse than it already was. And I thought about who I wanted to be, separate from who Madison had been. I'm not going to forgive you, I said finally. Not now, maybe not ever. What you did was unforgivable in any normal moral framework. You don't get absolution just because you're finally facing consequences. She nodded, looking down at her hands. But I'm also not going to actively pursue destroying you further. You're doing a fine job of that yourself. I won't press criminal charges. I won't sue you for damages. I'll accept that your life imploding is consequence enough. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. This isn't mercy, Madison. This is me choosing not to waste more energy on you than you've already cost me. You're not worth the ongoing effort of revenge. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, you really did build a good life. I'm actually proud of you, even though I have no right to be. You're successful and happy despite everything I did to you. That's impressive. Goodbye, Madison. After she left, I poured myself wine and stood at my windows watching the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. How are you doing? Your mother told me Madison went to see you. I'm fine, I texted back. We talked. It's done. Did she apologize? She tried. I'm not sure she understands what she's apologizing for, but she tried. Are you going to reconcile with her? I thought about his question carefully before responding. No, Madison and I are done. She's my biological sister, but not my family. That ship sailed 8 years ago, and it's not coming back to port. I understand. For what it's worth, I'm proud of how you've handled this situation. You sought truth and justice without descending to cruelty. That's character. My father's text made me smile, despite everything. His approval, which I'd lived without for so long, still mattered to me. Thanks, Dad. How are you feeling? Tired, but grateful to have witnessed the truth before dying. It matters to me that I know which daughter deserved my trust all along. He died 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning with my mother, Kyle, Austin, and me at his bedside. Madison was not invited, a decision my father had made explicitly in his final instructions. His last words to me were whispered, "Don't let anger poison the rest of your life. You're free of Madison now. Stay free." 6 months after my father's funeral, I stood in my new office on the 20th floor of Boston's financial district, looking out over the harbor. The promotion to senior partner had come through last month, along with a significant raise and this corner office I'd coveted since joining the firm a decade ago. My father's estate had been settled according to his wishes. Madison received nothing except an invoice for the money she'd stolen from her grandmother's accounts, split among the 5 grandchildren. She hadn't paid it, predictably, and the estate attorneys were proceeding with civil action as my father had authorized. Kyle had used his inheritance to buy a house. Austin invested his in his business. I put mine in a trust for my future children, a family I hoped to build someday with David, who'd proposed 2 months after my father's death. My mother and I maintained minimal contact. She'd never forgiven me for destroying Madison's life, a characterization so divorced from reality. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. She split her time between Florida and Connecticut, avoiding family gatherings where I might be present. Madison lived somewhere in the Midwest now, exact location unknown, reportedly working retail and keeping to herself. The offshore account had been seized by the IRS for tax violations. The money she'd stolen from our parents had been recovered through civil court, along with damages. She'd sent me a wedding gift 2 weeks ago, a coffee table book about architecture with a note card that read simply, "Congratulations." No return address, no phone number, no request for contact. Just acknowledgement that I'd moved forward without her. I didn't send a thank you note. Kyle and Austin came to the engagement party David and I hosted, as did aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd once believed Madison's lies. My professional colleagues came, friends I'd made during my years of exile, people who valued me for who I'd become rather than who I'd been born to be. "Your father would have loved this," my Aunt Rita said, squeezing my hand during the party. "He told me before he died that his greatest regret was missing your wedding someday. He made me promise to attend in his place, to walk you down the aisle if you'd let me." I hugged her tightly. This woman who'd apologized sincerely and worked to rebuild our relationship. I'd be honored. The wound Madison inflicted had scarred over, the kind of scar that would always be visible if you looked closely, but no longer dominated the landscape. I'd been asked recently by a journalist doing a follow-up story on the wedding scandal if I'd forgiven my sister. No, I'd replied honestly. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. Madison took 8 years of my life, destroyed my family relationships, and showed no genuine remorse until her own life collapsed. I don't forgive her, but I've moved on from her, which is different and arguably better. The journalist seemed surprised. So revenge was worth it? It wasn't revenge. I'd corrected. It was truth. Madison built her life on lies, and I exposed those lies at a moment when they'd have maximum impact. That's not revenge. It's justice. And yes, justice was worth it. Standing in my office now, I thought about that conversation. Had it been revenge? Partially, probably. I'd waited 8 years for the perfect moment to detonate Madison's carefully constructed lies, and I'd chosen her wedding specifically because I knew it would be devastating. But underneath the revenge was something more fundamental. The refusal to let lies stand unchallenged, to let injustice persist simply because correction would be uncomfortable. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. David calling during his lunch break. Hey, beautiful. Still admiring your office? Always. It's a nice office. You earned it. Speaking of earning things, I booked that restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. The one overlooking the harbor you loved. Perfect. We discussed wedding details for a few minutes, the comfortable conversation of people planning a life together. When we hung up, I returned to the windows, looking down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Madison was living a diminished life, the consequences of her choices following her indefinitely. Her name was permanently connected to fraud and theft online, making employment difficult. Her relationship with our mother was strained. Her friends had all abandoned her. She'd lost Patrick, lost the house, lost the future she'd envisioned. I'd lost 8 years with my family, years I could never recover. But I'd gained clarity about who genuinely valued me, strength from surviving betrayal, and the knowledge that truth, however delayed, eventually prevails. The scoreboard was uneven. Madison had taken 8 years from me. I'd taken her entire carefully constructed life, exposing every lie, revealing every theft, destroying her reputation and relationships permanently. Proportional? Maybe not. Satisfying? Absolutely. My father's warning echoed, don't let anger poison the rest of your life. I'd heeded his advice. I wasn't poisoned by anger anymore. I'd metabolized the rage into action. Used it as fuel to build something Madison could never touch, a life based on honesty, achievement, and genuine relationships earned through consistency rather than manipulation. Madison Sterling would spend years, perhaps decades, dealing with the consequences of framing me for theft. She'd never escape the stain on her reputation, never fully rebuild what she'd destroyed through her own greed and dishonesty. Meanwhile, I was thriving, successful, engaged, surrounded by people who knew my worth. My father had died knowing the truth. My brothers had rebuilt relationships with me. My extended family understood what really happened. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that when Madison told people her sister ruined her life, anyone who bothered to research would discover that Madison had actually ruined her own life through years of systematic theft, fraud, and betrayal. Justice wasn't always clean or comfortable. Sometimes it looked like a sister walking into a wedding reception with evidence of fraud, watching the lies unravel in real time, and feeling no guilt about the chaos that followed. Because the chaos wasn't my creation. It was the inevitable collapse of a structure Madison had built on foundations of deceit. I returned to my desk, where architectural blueprints for a new civic center awaited my review. Real work, honest work, the kind that built things rather than tearing them down. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Austin and I want to take you to lunch next week. Celebrate your promotion properly. Pick anywhere you want. Anywhere? I texted back, smiling. Anywhere. You deserve it. I did deserve it. I'd survived betrayal, rebuilt my reputation, succeeded despite obstacles my sister had deliberately placed in my path. I'd exposed the truth when it would hurt most, refused to let lies stand unchallenged, and moved forward into a life Madison could never poison, because she was no longer part of it. That was the real victory. Not that Madison's life had collapsed, though that was satisfying, but that mine hadn't. She'd tried to destroy me 8 years ago, and she'd failed. Every success I achieved now was proof of that failure. Every relationship I built was evidence that her lies hadn't permanently damaged me. The sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the water golden orange. I had a partner meeting in 20 minutes, then dinner with David. Then a lifetime of possibilities ahead of me built on foundations of truth rather than deception. Madison Sterling had taught me valuable lessons, that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that family is defined by actions rather than genetics, and that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it's justice perfected, waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal itself. And I'd learned to wait, to document, to prepare. And when the moment came, to strike with precision that left no room for comeback or redemption. Madison would carry the consequences of her choices for the rest of her life, just as I'd carried false accusations for 8 years. The difference was, my burden had been unjust and temporary. Hers was earned and permanent. That seemed fair to me.